there's this sort of levels of inventory complexity, okay? And I'm going to give you 10 levels. I'm giving you a preview, and then a bonus thing at the end. But most people actually don't get beyond one, and that's fine. But there's real value and as you move up the chain with this. So the first thing is to have your complexity, to have your inventory that identifies all the databases or data masses. That's a term I also borrowed from that BI network. That we call them protocol type things. You don't have access to a database, but there's data there that you need to interact with. So identify all the databases or data masses with some sort of summary of data system level information. All right. So we're going to talk in a minute about what that number of examples of what the data system level information is. Right, so that's the least complex thing. I'm just going to create an inventory of my stuff and like what its name is and all that. Now the next thing that you would do is maybe allow for the inclusion within that inventory of some documentation or some resources. So if you have ERD diagrams that someone has built, or you have a manual for the application, or API documentation, or anything else, if we've identified these systems, let's create some sort of repository or ability to collect the documentation for those systems. Some of this we're going to build as part of the inventory as we get to this other level of complexity, but some of it already exists. Most of these systems that you have purchased at least come with doc or links to websites where they have more information. So you want to bring that information in, not too complicated. All right. So the next step 3 is now bring in the technical metadata. So for all these database systems, have some process with which you can consume the data model information for tables, columns, procedures, etc. Now, what the format of this might vary based on what sort of model type it is. So if it's a relational database, there's going to be a lot of similarities, but if it's an API or if it's a CSV or something else, there might be different things. But most of them fall in this kind of concept of like objects and fields in this. So have a way to capture that. If don't forget to try to pick up like things like comments and notes when you do that, not just the names, because those of you who have been in higher ed for a while know some of these systems, they don't have very good naming standards. So if you can get that as well. So that's I'll talk about some ways to do that in a minute, but that's the next step. Fourth thing is start adding some additional attributes to the items in your data model. So you might add your own notes. You might add some data definitions to them. Oh, here's this thing called, enrollment status, right? So what does that mean? Like, how, do we have a business definition that we want to add to it that might be common across multiple systems, right? So you can start adding that. Security tags. This is a really useful thing to say. So it's like if you want to go through these data systems and tag certain data fields or tables as being PII, personally identifying information, or other security, things, this is a good place to do it. So you've brought in technical metadata, now you want to add to it by appending some additional information. Get more complex here. All right, the next step is reference data values. Okay, so what are these? You might hear them called like valid values or whatever, but a reference data is, I have in my student information system, I've got a list of registration statuses, right? A, D, N, W, add, drop, new, withdraw, right? In my other system, I've got that as, A and I, active and inactive, right? So what are my reference data values in each one? How do they map to each other, right? So that's another piece of information that's pretty, that can be very valuable to understand about the things that are in your data system. Like what are their reference data system, like values that you've got, and how do they compare to each other? Okay, moving on. Next level of inventory complexity is how these systems connect to each other. So this first step, we're only up to 6 here, is looking at a way to build sort of a general data map, just system to system. Like, does this system integrate with this? Does this system push data out to this? Does this system talk to this system? So if you can talk about how these systems connect, my LMS talks to my SIS, my data warehouse pulls data from my LMS and my SIS. How do these things fit together? And you can build a data map between connected and related systems. All right, next up, 7. Now, I mentioned definitions before in terms of an attribute in the data model, but now we're going to bring that even higher up. Like if you have at your institutions a business glossary or a data dictionary, and you have data definitions for business rules, things like active student or retention rate or aged balance receivable. Those things mean to you something to you in a business state. Now I've got 5 systems where someone is keeping track of my receivables. How is that aged balance or net date or whatever whatever it might be? How is that reflected in each one of those systems? If you can standardize across a business glossary definition and know how it's representative in each of those things, you're as good as being able to report off of all those systems and aggregate them. So having a business glossary or a data dictionary where you can have standard definitions and then map those to the data systems you have is the next big step. All right, after that is data quality. So data quality is often brought up when you say, what are some of the things that stand in the way of success with your data system, with reporting and other things? My personal opinion is that, and you've probably heard me say this if you've been on any of my other webinars, is that data quality is oftentimes over-reported as a problem, but it doesn't matter if it's over-reported or not. The perception of data quality is as good as actual data quality problems, because it will prevent people from trusting and using the data. So in order to resolve that, you need to have some way to assess the actual data quality of a system, to apply rules to it that you can use for that sort of assessment, and to identify and report and resolve issues. So having some sort of thing within your inventory to attach rules to the technical metadata and to report the data quality assessment values for that system, and then to be able to initiate some sort of issue and resolution to improve the assessment of those things. So data quality, we're getting more complicated, but still very valuable if you can get there. The next thing to do after this is to look at data flow. So we talked about this data map up here. That's a very general thing. Now data flow, we're talking about column level, table level, field level, on how things flow between systems or are getting used. So the lineage, like if there's an ETL that's pulling something out of this system and putting it in another, what is that? How is that flow working? Is there an API? What's the specific features of those APIs? Do we have extracts that we're using for data exchange, or do we have surveys that's pulling out of there? Are there reports that are running off of it? We're getting a little bit less inventory and a little bit more data dictionary here, but still documenting reports is a good thing. And then schedules and calendars. So we might have ETL process, but how is it run monthly? Is it run daily? Understanding all of these things. So I don't want to establish an unreachable line here, right? I mean, doing step 1 is good enough in my opinion, but once you can start connecting your inventory with all of these other things that you're trying to keep track of at your institution, now you're really getting there. Now you're cooking with gas. You can make some things happen. All right, lastly, 10 is, right now we've got all this stuff done. If you have a way to have sort of synchronization of this information, of the metadata, of the data quality rules, of the reference data values and all that, and you're able to monitor that and automate the synchronization of that process and have some sort of change management or impact analysis that occurs when there's issues, because one of the problems that you have if you're establishing some sort of inventory or dictionary-like process is that how do you keep it current, right? It is only as good as the last time it was updated. So having some ways, either through process or through actual automation, to keep the systems up to date, to keep the inventory up to date with what's actually in those systems, and then to be able to notify you if there's actions that need to be taken. Lastly, I said that I had one bonus. So this is the top 10. This last one, it sort of applies across the board, but you need, don't forget the sharing and maintaining. So this goes in some ways to maintaining, but even if you're just doing, level 1 manual stuff, you need some process with which keeping it going and also publishing and sharing it out.